Queen Elizabeth has been caught on camera speaking candidly about Chinese officials. She described them as being very rude during their visit to the UK last year. The Queen made the comments to a senior police officer at Buckingham Palace on Tuesday. Let's take a listen.
Represent Commander Lucy Dawson, the Golden Commander when the Chinese state visited, and who was seriously undermined by the Chinese.
So I'm not sure whether you knew, but it was quite a testing time for me.
I did.
It was, I think at the point that they walked out of Lancaster House and told me that the trip was off, I felt...
They were very rude to the ambassador.
They were. Well, she was, yes, Barbara, she was with me, and they walked out on both of us. I couldn't believe it. It was very rude and very undiplomatic, I thought.
Well, the Queen wasn't the only British leader who was caught on camera at Buckingham Palace. The Prime Minister, David Cameron, was heard criticising several countries that are due to attend an anti-corruption summit in London.
We've had a very successful cabinet meeting this morning. We talk about our anti-corruption summit. We've got the Nigerians. We've got some leaders of some fantastically corrupt countries coming to Britain. Nigeria and Afghanistan, possibly the two most corrupt countries.
Well, Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari has responded to Cameron's comments. Buhari, who was elected on a platform of wiping out corruption, said through his spokesman that he was shocked and embarrassed by the remarks. The Corruption Perception Index ranks Nigeria as 136th and Afghanistan as 160th of a total of 168 countries. Let's get more on this, on the reaction to the Queen's comments, and speak to TRT World correspondent Simon McGregor-Wood, who joins us live from London. Simon, this is quite a rare sort of gaffe by the Queen and the Prime Minister, also caught off guard. Are these comments likely to have any repercussions?
Well, I don't think it's clear. I think the more serious comments, or the more serious gaffe, if you like, is from the Prime Minister. Don't forget that on Thursday of this week, he's hosting both leaders of Nigeria and Afghanistan and many other countries at this well-publicised anti-corruption summit. So it's going to be a little awkward as he greets those two, President Buhari of Nigeria and President Ghani of Afghanistan, both of whom personally have rather good reputations for fighting corruption. It is clear that both of their states have long, historic and deserved, I would guess, reputations for being corrupt. It's endemic in both countries. Afghan and Nigerian leaders admit as much. But for a Prime Minister like David Cameron talking to the Queen at Buckingham Palace, making such a sort of flippant remark about how these are fantastically corrupt countries, rather schoolboyish, I think, and it won't go down terribly well, even though the core part of his message is probably widely accepted. The Queen, that's unusual because she, in her extraordinarily long reign, has built up a deserved reputation for being extremely discreet and diplomatic. So caught off guard there, not quite sure why. I think she was led into it, wasn't she, by the guy introducing the police officer, who obviously had trouble with the Chinese delegation. It was a controversial state visit. It was last October 2015. Clearly, this country, the United Kingdom, has lots to gain economically from a better relationship with the Chinese, but there were a lot of people in this country who felt uneasy that the Queen had been drawn into the regalia, the pomp and ceremony of a state visit, the red carpet literally being laid out for the Chinese president. And I think some people, given concerns about Chinese human rights record, etc., felt that that was perhaps a little bit over the top. But clearly very unusual to hear such indiscreet comments from both the Prime Minister and the Queen on the same day.
Indeed, you say it's very unusual to have them both caught out like that within 24 hours. How could something like this have been allowed to happen?
Well, I don't know. I think there'll probably be some nervous palace courtiers reviewing their procedures. These things are often filmed, part of a pool, a rotation of cameras that's allowed into these events. The thing where David Cameron was caught out was a sort of informal social engagement inside the palace to mark the Queen's 90th birthday. The thing outside, where the Queen rather put her foot in it, was one of the so-called royal garden parties in the grounds of Buckingham Palace, their annual events. All sorts of people from public life are invited. They get to meet the Queen and have a few words with her. So two very different kinds of events, but cameras are allowed in both, and the tapes were distributed to the wider media regardless of the content. So we might see a slight tightening of the rules. I don't know. I think in terms of the general public's reaction, as far as the Queen goes, I think people will be pretty encouraged and engaged by her speaking her mind. They don't often hear it. I think some people will be concerned about the Prime Minister's apparent lack of diplomacy, as I say, because of the sensitivity of the timing and the fact that tomorrow on Thursday he's got to greet those two leaders at a summit that is meant to tackle the issue of corruption. That will be a bit awkward, to put it mildly.
Awkward indeed. OK, many thanks for that. Simon McGregor Wood there in London.